am so pumped to share my guest today with you all on this new episode of Eighth and Grace. I'm welcoming you all into our grace space of messy faith. I have my friend Bailie White here with me, and I absolutely adore her. I am thankful to call her friend, and I honestly have been girl crushing a little bit on God, the way He moves
Aw,
within you. And that has
so
just been
sweet.
a beautiful thing to witness as
Thank
we've
you.
started becoming friends. And Bailey is a wife. She is a mother. She is a podcaster, a speaker, an entrepreneur.
All these
So
things.
all the list of things that I am so humbly honored for my favorite title to be able to call you friend. That means the most to me. And I just want to let you guys know, our listeners, that today I pray that you all find hope in this space with us and know that you're not alone doing life. We are all living life right now in the messy middle. As a matter of fact, I spilled my coffee on me on the way here, and I don't have to hide that or pretend like there's not a big spot under this necklace because we are in a grace space full of messy faith. So also, I was saying to Bailey that my socks are on inside out. So if I sit crisscross applesauce, you guys will see that. But anyway, Bailey and I have a lot of similarities in our stories that I'm hoping that you guys can grasp pieces on and learn something. I'm being inspired along the way of talking about our stories.
Yeah.
We both lived in Tennessee
Yep.
and recently moved to the Low Country. You moved to Savannah. I moved to Charleston. I was not very happy at all with the move when my husband's job moved us. We'd lived in Tennessee in the same county our entire lives growing up. And when I first got here, I was literally like Jonah. My well was parked at the port and I had been spit out in Nineveh. I was not a happy girl. Uh, we have similarities in our life and our businesses, some of the things that we've walked in with work. And one thing that I want you guys to take away today that are listening with us is that we can transition in our life and listen to the call of God for where He's leading us, even if we have to do it afraid.
Yeah.
And that was some of the things that I wanted to talk to you about. I know that you had previously built a beautiful travel business.
Yep.
And in year 5, decided that you were possibly feeling like an imposter in your own life because you didn't understand the trajectory of where God was changing things. And so I wanted to talk about that for a moment. And the beauty that I find in that, in the unknown of that, is year 5. 5 is the number of grace. And, you know, God's hand was all over it, even though you didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah.
So, how did you feel at that moment when you were building this life that you thought you were building and living in what you thought was what you wanted and the
Yeah.
dream, but woke up one morning saying, is this it?
Yeah. It's so funny that you use that word imposter because oftentimes I think, especially like in the entrepreneurial space, people are like, oh, it's imposter syndrome. And like everybody has that feeling of like fake it till you make it and all that. And it's not to say that I felt like an imposter like in my business. Like I was good at what I was, like I was good at what I was doing. It wasn't that at all. And I mean, I like to think that I was doing a good job serving my clients and being a leader to my team and all that. It wasn't that. It was more so that it was becoming more and more clear to me that this business that I created was something that was good, that brought a lot of good things to my life and to my family. And it was what I called like my first baby, like I loved it. But it was becoming more and more clear to me that it was a square peg and the rest of my life was a round hole, like who I was and the experience that I wanted to have walking around planet Earth, like the way I wanted to live a life, that was a round hole.
Right.
And it's like I couldn't fit the two together.
So the identity that you thought you were finding in yourself growing this business was not necessarily.
Yeah, you could say that. It was like I just couldn't fit the two together.
Right.
It's like the person that I wanted to be in every other area of my life didn't fit into the business that I had created, if that makes sense. And I wrestled with it for a really long time. It's funny that you're like, in one morning you woke up and there was a defining moment when I knew, and it was in the morning time. I was doing a devotional, like that I knew I was gonna put it down. Like, I didn't even know if that was going to be selling it or what. I just like,
Right.
in an act of like surrender, I was like, okay, God, like I will. But that came months after wrestling with it. And it was, I mean, it was a really tough decision for me.
Now, your travel business, it wasn't like it was a small scale
Mm-mm.
business. You multi-million dollar company that you had started
That's crazy.
and was running
Yeah.
with a team. And you were even featured in some high media
Mhm.
places.
Yeah.
So this wasn't just like a small business that
No.
one day you were like, oh, this thing isn't doing well and I just don't want to do it
Yeah.
anymore. This is like a big call to reality and life changing.
Yeah.
I mean, did you wonder, like, yeah, what is this going to do for my family?
Yes.
Because you wanted more family time,
Yeah.
right? But then it's
Right.
like, okay, I built this business and this dream to take care of them. And now I'm scaling back. And I can only imagine not only what it was like listening to the call of God to move on that, but also I'm sure the enemy was coming in, like we said, and especially the one thing, I said imposter because the world would like us to think, especially in the creative world, right? Because now we're both podcasting, we're
Mhm.
speaking, writing.
Right.
In this world, everyone's like imposter syndrome or this or that. But truly, we know that this is our story.
Right.
God is really writing our story, and we can't be the imposter in our own
Right.
story. The enemy would like us to think so.
Right.
And until we truly grasp that God is changing the trajectory of what's going on,
Yeah.
we believe those lies. And I mean, I'm sure you question, like, oh my goodness, like,
Well, yeah.
is this the right thing, right move?
Well, yeah, because like you said, like we had, I say we, because like I had a team of girls that were like
Right.
equally, like I considered them my equal at this point. Like
Mhm.
I loved these girls so much. And we built up the company and the brand that found a lot of success. And like
Yeah.
at the time that I sold, I mean, we had took it to a really cool place. We had, like you said, like, cool recognitions and all that. And like, we'd even started to work with like celebrities. And these are like household names, like people like that huge. And it was
Yeah.
very cool, but also nauseating, but like cool. And, it's just
Right.
like, oh my gosh, I can't believe. So like while we had had all this success, there was also this point of like, I feel like we're just getting started, like it was like, man, and there's so much
And
potential
it
here.
want to grow and grow.
Yeah. And I remember there was a news article that came out about the acquisition where I was interviewed, and one of the things that they pulled, like a quote that I said was, and this was so true, like I had all these big dreams for the company and I couldn't unsee them. But the place I wanted to take the company, my dreams for the company, they were just a bigger square peg. And like, you know what
It
I
just
mean? It
wasn't
was just like,
fitting
it
you.
wasn't, and I couldn't unsee the dreams. And like, and when I said I wrestled with it, like I was given a lot of advice, like, why don't you just like make it small again? Like just, like, and try to like fit it, then maybe it'll fit.
Then it'll
into your,
fit.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, that didn't feel right either. And so I couldn't take that advice. Like that was like one of the many avenues that I explored to try to make it all work. Like how could I have it all? And it's like I didn't want to do that. Like if I was going to do the business, like I wanted to do the business,
Right.
like I was like, let's do this thing big. And I couldn't unsee those big
And
dreams.
that's the thing. Like, of course, we get really good advice from our friends
Yeah.
and family. And sometimes, and they mean well, but sometimes that good advice isn't God advice.
Yeah.
And it's like trying to hold on and control
Yeah.
what God's telling us to let go of.
Yeah.
And that's why no matter how hard we try to fit something in, if it doesn't fit in the season where God's calling us to, if that's not his plan for us, it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard for us to trust sometimes that his plan, even though we can't see it, it's good. His plan for us is good. So tell me this, when you sold your business, did you automatically know, like, okay, so this is what I'm going to do? Like, did God give you this vision now and you knew what you were going to do next? Or was it like mundane moments, just step after step of surrendered yeses for you to know what you were going to do? How did you know what you were going to do next?
We had no idea.
Okay.
Like literally didn't find that. And it was a situation where, I was thinking about it on the way here, actually, like driving. And I was like, I never want to be like this, like poster child of like, take the risk and like, it'll all work out because like you have to be smart. But at the time, like we didn't have a plan B. We had a plan. I don't know if I can like cuss on this podcast, like, but like if shit hit the fan,
Right.
we knew what we were going to do. Like we were like, okay, this is our worst case scenario plan. But we really didn't know what was going to happen next because and I like on podcasts when people are just straight up. So like with the sale of the company, we knew that that would ride us out for 18 months
Yeah.
financially, like with the life that we were living.
Yeah.
And at the end of that road, at the end of that 18 months, we knew something had to change
Exactly.
because with the loss of my income, we couldn't afford the life that we were living
Right.
anymore. And so we didn't know what was going to happen next. I didn't have this like big plan. And then I'll go tell my story at like, no, we
Right.
didn't know what was going to happen next.
So, what was the pivotal moment that led you? Because now, one of the biggest things besides speaking and being a mom and an entrepreneur that you've been is you speak to women and encourage them on their journey to find their brand of beautiful.
Yeah.
So, what moment did you know? What was there a definitive moment for that, or
For speaking?
yeah, did that just
No, there was no, and I think that sometimes it can be both. Like sometimes you have this moment where it's when I knew I was going to put down the company. That was a very clear moment for
Yeah.
me. Like a defining, I can still picture the chair I was sitting in. I know, like had a blanket over me. I was doing devotion. I was crying. Like I just knew that like God was speaking to me in that moment. Like you're going to sell.
like he was just sitting right there with
It was like he was right there. Like it wasn't
Absolutely.
an audible voice. I've never heard an audible voice, and I know some people do, but like, that wasn't it. But it was just like I knew, like
Yeah.
I was so confident. But with the speaking, it was a lot of little things, and I think that that's also how God leads people. It's like a
Absolutely.
bunch of little God
Absolutely.
winks and like a bunch of I remember one time, one of the little things, like I was getting, encouragement from friends
Yeah.
and I was seeing ads on Instagram of like how to get into speed. I've never gotten ads
Right.
like that, but we're like, that's weird.
Because that's a big transition for
Yes,
going
yeah,
from
it's like,
having a
what?
travel agency to like, I'm going to go around and speak to women
Yeah.
all over the world. It's just,
Yeah, like it was weird, but I remember one of the things that I heard was so we had an indoor gym in our garage and my husband had been doing early morning workouts with one of my uncles. And this uncle, God bless him. Anyone that knows this man is like laughing right now, thinking of me trying to describe him. He's like one of those guys that like, he has a great heart. He loves the Lord, but he's kind of a pain in the butt too. And he's like one of those that like, he speaks his mind and like, when I was going to start my travel agency, he didn't think it was a good idea. And he was like, I'll support you no matter what you do, but like, I don't think this is a good idea. But he's a great businessman. I respect him. Like, I actually think a lot of him as a person, as difficult as he is. So, anyways, Slade's working out with him in our garage. That's my husband. And I woke up one morning, so they were doing like early morning workouts, and my ring, like on my phone, like the cameras, the security cameras was like buzzing on my phone. And I was like, what am I doing out there? And so I opened it and I could hear what they were saying. And I overheard this conversation where my uncle asked Slade, well, what's Bailie going to do now? Like, what's next? Because she sold the company, like, what's next? And Slade was like, I don't know, man. Like, she's been talking about maybe speaking, but like, I'm not really sure. Like, she doesn't really know what she wants
she
to do.
doesn't know how to do it.
She doesn't know. And he was like, absolutely, that's what she needs to be doing. She would be so perfect at that. And like, he just went on and on about how great I would be at that. And I overheard it. And I've never told that story before.
Like the one that's really like a bee on my side is the one that's like, yes.
The one that is like very hard and critical of people at times. Like he was like, she's made for that. And I remember being like, God, but that was still months before I ever even started. Like I kind of started to ride a keynote and then I got pregnant and then we moved to Savannah and then eventually I picked it back up and like hit the ground running. But it was a bunch of little things.
Before those steps, before it started working out per se, did you go through a phase where you regretted your decision or you knew once God called you to it, you knew that that's what you were going to
No, I knew. And I've never once regretted the decision. I miss it sometimes. I miss my girls. I miss the travel perks.
Yeah.
But I don't regret because I wrestled with it for so long.
Right.
And I think you would be able to speak to this more than I would, but like the Bible talks about wrestling with God.
Yes, absolutely.
And like I wrestled with it hard for like a long time to where like there's no way I could doubt my decision ever.
Yeah.
Because
Do you know that is literally one of my favorite stories in scripture is about Jacob wrestling with God. And I fell at work 5 years ago and I've had a hip injury and it has been a difficult journey. It's been a beautiful one watching God. But to say, oh, it's just been easy would be a lie. But one of the things that really jumped out at me about Jacob's story was when he wrestled with the angel of the Lord, he did not ask him to heal his hip that the angel of the Lord had literally just dislocated while they
Mhm.
were wrestling. He did not even ask him to heal him. He said that he wanted him to bless him. And, he wrestled with the angel of the Lord. And I just think about that. And there are so many times in our lives when we wrestle
Mhm.
truly with God. And once we get up from that match, right? Like we know,
Yeah, yeah.
after you've been with
Yeah.
him, because that's not pretty. Like, right? Those aren't the pretty moments that everybody thinks like when deliverance, like when a true God moment like that happens in your life, like,
Yeah.
and you've been there
You know.
and it's messy and you
Mhm.
wake up, I mean, you stand up with tears in your eyes and like you
Mhm.
said, audibly, not audibly,
Yeah.
he's sitting right here with me. I know I've heard the
Mhm.
voice of God when I wrestled with him. And so it's clear.
Yeah.
And that's one of the beautiful things about wrestling with God. I wouldn't say, oh, that's my favorite pastime. But I do know that anytime I've personally wrestled with God and seen, it's always been like when plans are changing,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
And that's when he has shown me every time that regardless if I know the way, his plan is always good.
Mhm.
And, another thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately is, when the Israelites were going to have to cross over Jordan and the priests were getting ready to go into the river, God did not recede that water before they stuck their foot in.
Mm.
He had them stick their foot in
Mhm.
first, and then he receded the
Mhm.
water. And so, in those wrestling times, I believe that's when our faith is strengthened even the most when we truly don't understand. We're standing flat-footed basically in the middle of hell.
Mhm.
All of hell's coming against us. And we're like, I know he's for me.
Mhm.
I know I trust him. And I'm going to put this foot forward.
Mhm.
And that's when we see God move. That's when we see our faith, even in those wrestling times.
Mhm.
And that's the beauty in the unknown.
Yeah.
I think that is truly the beauty in the unknown. I also wanted to ask you, now that you do speak to women,
Mhm.
primarily you speak to women, you go through ministries, you speak to women in ministry. Do you see that while you had your travel agency, that God was preparing you then for the type of connections that you made? Did that prepare you for what you're doing now?
Um,
Those type of relationships
did the types of relationships
that
prepare me?
you grew? Because what I'm wondering is because obviously God wastes nothing.
Yeah.
And so he didn't allow you to grow a multi-million dollar business and then ask you to lay it down
For nothing.
for nothing. It was
Right.
done for naught.
Right.
And so I wondered, that was what I was thinking about on the way here was what did you learn? Are there key things that you could take away when you had your travel agency that you see yourself using now that you can look back and say, wow,
Yeah.
that's why that happened. And now this is why this happened. Now I can see this part of the story.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, it's so funny to like hear the word ministry and maybe that's what I still feel so insecure like using that word like
Yeah.
ministry because it's like I didn't go to seminary school and like
Right.
and I don't stand up and preach and a lot of my content that I go and speak to women about is like I have a recruitment like
Yeah.
experience keynote that I give to girls that are
Yeah.
going through sorority recruitment.
Yeah.
And I don't say anything about Jesus, but you know what's so funny is like I get off the stage and I'll talk to girls and they're like, "You're a Christian. We can just tell."
Mhm.
And like sometimes I feel like that's my ministry is I'm
Absolutely.
not I'm not preaching at you. My prayer is that I'm living a life that like maybe somebody can see him in me.
But they can see your ministry. Your life is your ministry.
Yeah.
The life that you're living is your actual ministry.
Yeah.
And that's how they learn
Yeah.
from you is they see him in you.
Yeah.
And that was why, when we started this, I was like, I have a girl crush on the way I see God move in your life, even the details when you don't see him there.
Yeah.
And the grace that he has,
Yeah.
over us. And, you know, I think that I love even more so than someone that boastfully talks about how
Yeah.
they're this and they're
Yeah.
that and my
Right.
because at the end of the day everything we do it's for the glory of God.
Right.
And, none of this is about us. And
Right.
we can pretend that it is. And we can all,
Yeah.
go through life and pretend that it is. But life is much easier when we realize
Yeah.
that it's about Him and
Yeah.
everything that we have
Yeah.
is through Him.
I agree.
But
I didn't even answer your question though. To answer, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I just like got so sidetracked. To answer your question, no. Like when I sold, I felt like I had made a mess. Like I didn't think like, oh, and here's why. Like here's a very clear path.
right,
Talk about living in the mess. It's like I felt like I made a mess. I felt like I was
right.
a kid that made a mess, and like I knew that it was the right decision to sell my company, but I also felt like, what are we gonna do? Like 18 months. Like what are we gonna do? Like I felt like I had made a mess. But I felt like God sat with me in the mess for a while.
You know what I love about what you just said is while you were in the mess, God sat with you and He gave you peace in chaos.
Yeah.
He gave
Oh yes.
Like you literally
Makes
have like
no
a
sense.
wilderness peace that makes absolutely no sense when everybody else is like looking at you like, what is she going to do? And how's this going to go? And you're like, I don't know how it's going to go, and I don't even know what I'm going to do next, but I have peace.
I know.
And that is
I
so
know.
beautiful that He sat with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And he can like, I was a believer. I've been a believer since I was a child. My pastor growing up, his name was Mike Glenn, and he always said, God has a way of taking your darkest moments and turning it into the first line of your testimony.
Yes.
And that's not the first line of my testimony, but it is the first line in a really cool story.
Absolutely.
I mean, he took the mess that I felt like I had made
Yeah.
and turned it into something really beautiful. And now I get to go around and I get to speak to women, and I get to, maybe he, is seen through me, or, I could just get to be a positive, I don't know, like inspiration to women maybe, or teach them about goal setting. That's something else that I'm doing now too, is like leading a goal setting workshop, and just getting to share with women that like you can make your life your brand of beautiful, and here's
Absolutely.
how. And yeah, so it's been really cool.
Absolutely. Regardless of the terrain.
Yeah.
And even when life takes a different direction, because, I think one thing that we all do, and it's a normal part of life, is we make our plans, right? Like we all have calendars, we all, we all keep our Calendly or whatever it is that we, write in our air contra planner, whatever it is that you use. And we make our plans, but the Lord establishes.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's really cool that we think that we're in control.
Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
are not in control.
That's my favorite proverb.
Yeah.
That, I mean, he will establish your steps. Like
Yes.
we can dream all we want, and he loves that.
And He loves that.
He loves that.
Yes, He wants His kids
Yeah.
to dream. I mean, He
Yes.
delights in us
Mhm.
and loves us. We are so loved, but He ultimately establishes our path. And so, when we make these plans and life doesn't go exactly according to the plans that we made,
Mhm.
or the dreams that we were building, the businesses that we were building, or, if the marriage doesn't go the way we think it's going to go, or if we struggle with fertility, whatever it is in our life that we are walking through, that we had our own plans, when they go awry to what we thought,
Yeah.
those are the times that if we could just cling to Him and know that He truly does have a plan for us. And like I've said, I don't know how many times during our talk, but that His plan is good.
It
His
is.
plan for us is so good. And that's what I was going to ask you about. Lastly, is so now that you travel all around,
Mhm.
you do workshops,
Mhm.
you speak to women everywhere, you go to campuses, so you speak to all ages of women, young women, older women. If you were now speaking to a younger woman, knowing what you know
Mhm.
and the knowledge that you have and the life that God is creating and the life that you're creating and your brand of beautiful,
Mhm.
what would you say? Is there one statement that you have? Is there a question that you have? If you could go back to your 20-year-old self, that you would say to yourself to give yourself hope and to know that this may not look like the way you planned, but just hold on, baby, because
Yeah.
we're going somewhere.
We're going somewhere.
Is there something is it a statement? Is there a question? What do you tell with the knowledge that you have now?
So I took everything that I learned to get to where I am today.
Absolutely.
And I learned a lot. And I've even recently in the past 6 months been doing like a lot of reflection on that. And then when I launched my podcast and I started talking to other women about how they created
Mhm.
their brands of beautiful in life. And maybe their version of a beautiful life is not one that I would want any part of, but it's their brand of a beautiful life. And how did they create it? I started to kind of distill down everything that I was learning. And I was like, there's a method here. This is the Your Brand of Beautiful method. And it's quite simple. I mean, almost everyone follows this pattern of stop being busy, quiet the noise, start being you. And if you're ever in a place where you feel like I'm not even myself right now, like what's going on, like maybe life feels like it's spinning out of control, just like reset, stop being busy, quiet the noise, and then start being you again. And I think that that just like rhythm and that practice and that method would have served me so well at so many different points in
Right.
like my 20s. I wish that like if I could go back in time and just tell my 20-year-old self like, hey, it's gonna be a bumpy ride.
Right?
It's gonna like life's gonna take you crazy places.
Life is
Like,
really gonna be
life's
life.
gonna, like,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be fun. But like if you start to feel like you're spinning out of control, just stop being busy, quiet the noise, start being you. And I think that's what I would tell myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is beautiful.
Thank you.
And just to be you, because
Yeah.
every one of our stories is so unique and so individual, and God is still writing our story, and I think that is the part that we get hung up on sometimes when things don't go exactly the way we planned, or if things look different than the
Yeah.
way we planned, is that He's still writing our story.
Yeah.
And He is going to use every single step of it for something, even when we can't see it. And we may never know what that was. But I love that you said, and to start being you, because we get so caught up in what everybody else is doing.
Oh my God.
Right? Like that's how the world tells us to measure success. It's what everybody else is doing. Because to the world, when you were in a multi-million dollar business,
That was it, baby.
right? And you had celebrities and
Crack
we were
the
in the
code.
media out, like you did it. Like, and now you're like, I just kind of want to scale back. I want to do something different. I want to give back in a different way. I want to be with my family and have time. Success looks different to everybody.
Yeah.
And everybody's story is different. And there is room for every one of us in every call, in every calling. And that's one of the things that I absolutely love. To speak with other women about is no matter what God's leading you to, no matter what God's calling you to do, no matter how saturated you think that is, if it's oversaturated, if it's a path that's well traveled, if it's one, then it's a new terrain. Everybody thinks you're crazy for going the opposite way. There is room for every one of us. And we don't have to get, caught up in competition. We don't have to look at how she's doing this or what she's saying, because at the end of the day, if God would have wanted another her, He would have created her.
Yeah.
And He needs us individually for our voices collectively
Yes.
to tell our stories.
Yes, ma'am.
And sometimes without walking through the pain of the hard, we tend to miss the holy. We tend to miss the holy moments that He's calling us to. And I think that's one of the things is that we would like to say, I woke up and I started this big business and life has just been amazing.
Yeah.
And I follow God and I never have any struggles. And I think people see us and meet us where we are in our lives. If they were to see the Bailie White that you are today and meet you today, they would measure you. The world would measure you by the success of who they see you today.
Yeah.
And sometimes people would envy you. I mean, hey, to be a speaker, to get to go speak to, multiple women and to live this life and to get to have a good family balance, right?
Yeah.
And could be envious, but they also don't know what that costs.
Yeah.
The nights that you spent crying and saying, hey, I'm standing here, feel like I'm spiraling out of control.
Yes.
What's going on?
Yeah.
And I think that if I could say one thing to our listeners, to our friends that have been with us today, that if they could take away anything from anything that we have sat on this couch and said to one another, I was truly trying to think about that earlier. Like, what do I want our listeners? What do I want the people that are listening to us today, our friends that have given us their time, what do I want them to take away? And I think my most favorite thing that we have said is what you are living by.
Mm.
And that's if you feel like you're spiraling out of control, you stop.
Stop being busy. Quiet the noise.
And just
start being you.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That is the most beautiful.
We overthink it.
Listen now, you want to start talking about some of the ers? I am a recovering overthinker. Okay. I am a coffee reheater. I am a recovering overthinker. And you're
Mhm.
right. I think we're overthinking it. So for all of you out there with us today, don't have to overthink it. Just quiet the noise, get alone with God, and ask Him. You know what? Ask Him who it is that He would have you be. What is your identity in Him?
Yeah.
And what does He have for you? For you to just be you.
Yeah.
It's okay to just be you.
Yeah. Literally every single day, I'm like, guide our steps, guide our steps. What are our decisions? We want you to be inside of them.
Yeah.
Open the doors that are meant to be open, close the ones that are meant to be closed. Like, if we have to sit in the hallway sometimes, okay, cool. Like, I just want him to be in control of our every step.
Yes.
And
Amen.
that's the prayer every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm so honored that you're on today.
Thanks for having me.
If our friends want to find you, how can they hear my friend Bailie White and Air Branded Beautiful?
The podcast is called Your Brand of Beautiful. And I'm on Instagram at Hey Bailey White. And that's about where you can find me. I have a website, BaileyWhite.com, and I do a newsletter. But you know what? I just decided recently that I'm like, part of my brand of beautiful is not to be all up on social media all the time.
Exactly.
So, like, I kind of gave up on that. So you can
Right.
come hang out with me on Instagram. It's very real life stuff.
Yes.
And yeah, just come be my friend.
So what about if they want to find Bailie to speak?
BaileyWhite.com is the best place for that.
Perfect.
Shoot me an email, shoot me a DM. I'm easy to get a hold of.
All right.
So,
Well,
yeah.
all right. So until next time, guys, we are with Bailie. We've been in our grace space for messy faith, and I pray that you have taken something away today, that we have been hubs of hope for you and inspired you to just be yourself. Until next time.
Yeah.
All right. I feel like that was good. Did we do it? That was good.